Sup y'all, it's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today I want to talk to you guys about a number of different things. There have been some changes made to how Mythic Plus dungeons are going to reward loot, specifically on the first week whenever they come out, and also after that in terms of how much loot you get at the end. Whenever you complete a Mythic Plus dungeon and the keystone is not depleted, you get a chest of loot. They basically reduce the amount of loot that you get from that chest. We're going to talk about that. Also, they've made a hotfix with the Legendaries. Now, people were stating and saying that it was like after one person would get a legendary, it seemed like everybody that got one legendary ended up getting a second legendary. Now, because it's all like really kind of, we don't really know how this works. We don't really have a large sample size. We don't really know what if people are telling the truth or not. It's very hard to actually judge if that's true or not. But there have been a lot of polls and a lot of, I guess, like polling and just sampling from people, and many of the people who received one legendary ended up receiving two at a higher ratio. Like as an example, guys, just so you can kind of understand. So let's say your chance of getting legendary is 1 in 100. Your chance of getting a second legendary would be a second 1 in 100, which for both of those things to occur would be a 1 in like 10,000 or something like that. So people were getting two legendaries at a higher ratio than that, and so that led people to believe that there was probably some sort of bug going on with giving people a second legendary whenever they got their first one, or at least increasing their chances of getting a second one after they got their first one. Blizzard actually did confirm that this was true, which was a big surprise to me. I didn't really make any sort of a comment on this because I had no idea. It seemed a little fishy to me, but it could be confirmation bias. It could be a little bit of jealousy. I'll give you the truth. I haven't gotten one yet. So there have been a lot of reasons why I didn't really want to make a comment. And so it actually did come as a big surprise to me that Blizzard actually did make a change today in regards to the legendary items, and they fixed the bug, which has gotten a lot of people, including myself, a little bit bothered, and so I want to talk about that as well. And also the last thing I want to talk to you guys about, the big thing, honestly, is patch 7.1. Patch 7.1 just hit the PTR today. Really, really big deal about that. We've got Karazhan coming in patch 7.1. The Trials of Valor, which is going to be the raid that's going to be in between, I guess like next week is going to be the Emerald Nightmare, and then the Trials of Valor are going to be in between the Emerald Nightmare and Nighthold. Nighthold doesn't come out until January, and so the Trials of Valor are going to come in between and kind of finish up the storylines in terms of like Odin, Helya, Stormheim, and pretty much everything else involved with that. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. So anyway, guys, the first thing I want to talk to you about is the Mythic Plus loot changes. Now, for the first week of the Mythic Plus dungeons coming out, and I'll probably have a guide at some point with like kind of like basics for like what you should do or what you should know for Mythic Plus dungeons, like the different fixes and everything like that. But for now, all I really want to talk about is the loot. Next week, basically, like, let me kind of explain what our plan was so you can kind of see why Blizzard nerfed this method. If you complete a Mythic Plus 10 dungeon, you got a chest at the end of it that gave you, I think it was like 3 personal pieces of loot. So each person in the group, you would basically add 15 pieces of loot to the group each time that you would do it, right? That would be 3 times 5. Yes, that's 15. And my numbers could be a little bit wrong, but basically it would give you 3 pieces, I think, of loot that were 865. I am certain on that item level. And so they've nerfed that to, instead of give 3 pieces of loot to each person, I believe, it now gives 2 pieces of loot to the entire group. I think that's what it is. Now, a lot of people are kind of upset about this because that was kind of like their plan. That was our plan as well. And of course they nerfed that. I mean, of course that would just completely make like Mythic dungeons, like Emerald Nightmare, anything below like Emerald Nightmare Heroic, DOA, Dead on Arrival, there'd be no reason to go do that. And it was just too powerful of a gearing method, I believe. And so I'm not really surprised that they nerfed it. Now, obviously, people can be a little bit frustrated because this makes gearing a little bit more difficult. But I would say that if you start off the game in full 895 gear, it's probably not going to be a very engaging experience. So I think that they do need to level the playing field a little bit, and they did maybe nerf it a little bit too much, but we'll see what happens. I do think that hopefully things do turn out, and that also is not going to affect the amount of loot that you get from your Challengers cache each week. If you guys didn't know, Mythic Plus dungeons, whenever you complete one of them, it's kind of like if you guys remember back in Burning Crusade, or I think it was Wrath of Lich King 2, you would get a certain amount of honor points the next week, depending on how high your previous arena rating was. And it's going to work in the same thing with the same thing in Legion with the Myth Plus dungeons. And so the higher level you clear, the next week there's a cache in your class order hall that has gear that corresponds to how high you've cleared up, and that gear can go all the way up to 880. Now, there's also been another change that's going to be exclusive just to the first week that the Mythic Plus dungeons are going to come out, which is going to be the gear that you can get from Mythic Plus dungeons cannot go above 850. Now, the reason I think that they're doing that is to kind of get people to go into the Emerald Nightmare and not just focus on repeating Mythic dungeons, Mythic Plus dungeons ad nauseum, which is kind of a good idea. I think it will make sure that people do the raid, and after the first week, all of the gear will turn out to just be the same as it was on beta, probably, in terms of, like, I guess, like, what the item level is. I don't really, obviously they have made changes with the types of gear and the amount of gear that you're going to get. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk about is the legendary changes. Now, the legendary changes are, you know, you can say that this, and it's not really kind of an outrageous thing to say, is that you can say that these changes are kind of pulling up the ladder on players that haven't gotten any legendary, and kind of separate any legendaries, and kind of separating the gap between players, because now the people that have 2 legendaries, they're that much farther ahead because they had an advantage getting from their first legendary to their second one. The people who have 0 legendaries not only don't have that first legendary, but now they're not going to have that extra added bonus that everybody else did that got the legendary first to get their second one as well. So it broadens the gap between players who got very, very lucky and players who didn't by a lot more. And with raids coming out and everything like that, you can see why that would frustrate a lot of people, especially whenever they don't really have a very steady and very solid raid spot in their guild. Personally, I don't really know what they should do. It was a really big fuck up on their part. They cannot take the legendaries away from the people who got them, guys. Like, anybody that says that's fucking ridiculous. They're not going to do that, and they shouldn't. What they should probably do is increase the chance. Like, I've been pretty outspoken. I thought that the legendaries would be a good idea if you were able to target the legendaries and kind of work towards them. But now that it's basically thrown completely up to RNG, you have no way to control your RNG. We don't know if there's any bad luck prevention implemented. We have no idea what the fuck is going on with these legendaries. I'm really not a fan. I really, really don't like them. So, if anything, I think they should just increase the chances of people getting them, so people can at least work towards getting all of the legendaries rather than maybe hopefully getting one and it's the wrong one. It's like one that gives you a shield, and like one of your DPS ones gives you like 20% more damage. It's going to be ridiculous if that happens, and I do think it could create some pretty big disparities. And you know, I do want to make the argument, and I don't want to talk about this for a very long time, but I just don't want to make the argument, is that gaining like large amounts of player power in World of Warcraft is very different than a game like Diablo 3, which is where this system has been ported over from. And the reason for that is in World of Warcraft, you have to rely on the cooperation of other players, whereas in Diablo 3, you can play that entire game solo. So, because you have to rely on the cooperation of other players in World of Warcraft, giving players arbitrary advantages over other people actually does hurt them, because it creates a zero-sum environment where people who have those arbitrary advantages, i.e. legendaries, are ahead of the people who don't. Now, obviously, you can still outperform a moron that has a legendary if you really know what you're doing, but given equal footing, the guy that has the legendary is going to be able to outperform you based on pretty much just pure RNG. And I don't really think that doesn't make me feel good whenever that happens. And it also probably doesn't make anybody feel good just arbitrarily getting a legendary. Obviously, it's going to be amazing whenever I get one, but I don't really think that the feeling that I'm going to get whenever I get one makes up for all of the feelings that I'm going to get and other people are going to get whenever they don't get chosen for a raid, or they get bumped out of the raid team for somebody that does get lucky over somebody themselves who maybe might not get as lucky. And so the second legendary really kind of exacerbates that problem, and as I said, I don't really know what they should do. They probably won't do anything. That's probably what's going to happen, so nothing really to talk about there. Now, the third thing, the big thing, guys, is Karazhan is coming out in patch 7.1. Now, we do not have a release date for whenever Karazhan is coming out. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff coming out with Karazhan. There's a new pet battle achievement. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Raiding with Leashes 4. You guys are going to have a video on that. You guys fucking know it. It's going to be great. And also, there's some other stuff as well, like, the new raid. And one thing that I was actually kind of curious about is if Karazhan would have an attunement, and it turns out that Karazhan will have an attunement. There has been some, I guess, like frustration among some people, and including myself. One of the things that you have to do to get attuned to Karazhan, at least right now, for what people have gathered, is you have to have at least 3 followers from your class order hall at item level 850 in order to complete a certain mission that's required for some point in the Karazhan attunement process. Now, that's not the only thing that you have to do. There are a lot of dungeons involved. That's what Ian Hazacostas today said on Twitter. But that doesn't necessarily exclude these garrison missions, basically. And I don't really like that. I don't really see why people wouldn't be able to enter a raid because their followers don't have high enough item level. Of course, you could make sense of it, but from a gameplay perspective, it seems very, very ridiculous. I hope they take that out, or they at least add an alternative. Like, if you do all Mythic dungeons, you don't have to do the followers, or if you do the followers, you don't have to do all Mythic dungeons. Something like that, a little bit of choice, because I think that a lot of people, it feels to me like Blizzard is repeating a mistake that they made in 6.2 with requiring the shipyard in order to get the legendary ring, with requiring these class order hall mission followers to be up to 850 for you to even enter Karazhan. It seems kind of ridiculous to me. But, we'll have to see what happens. And ultimately, I don't really think it's going to be too big of a deal. It's not going to be probably as annoying as a shipyard, I can say that. And ultimately, I'm going to do it. I'm still doing I was doing my class order hall champions a few days ago before they announced this. I'm still going to be doing them now. Nothing's really going to change. And they're a good way of making money, of accessing more gear, and doing a number of other things. And so I don't necessarily think that they should take it out of the game or anything like that. But I'm not really a big fan of them making it required to enter a raid, or actually it's not a raid, it's a dungeon, but it's like an 8 or 9 boss dungeon. So they've also added a couple of new mounts into 7.1 with Karazhan. You're going to be able to ride Nightbane, which is like... Like, I'm pretty happy about that. Like, I remember seeing Nightbane back in the day. Like, whenever people said that, I was like, yo, how's that even going to work, right? Because he's on fire. But, I mean, you can ride Alar. So, I mean, okay, sure. And it looks pretty cool. Also, they added a new updated version of Midnight. I used to get that from Attunement and Huntsman. And it was really, really cool seeing it, right? Because ultimately, guys, it's just a reskin version of the Gilnean Warhorse. But... it looks really, really fucking badass. So I'm really, really glad to see that. I remember when the first time I saw Midnight back in 06, whenever Karazhan originally came out, I thought I was like, oh, damn, that mount looks awesome. And so now seeing it again kind of gave me that same feeling. And even though it's like 10 years later, 10 years later, it's still really, really cool to feel that same way, and I cannot wait to get them out. Hopefully these mounts will not be just given to everybody, and you'll have to actually really do something to get them. Also, there's going to be a Basilisk mount added into the game, as well as a Nightfallen Exalted mount added into the game. So I'm very much excited for that. 7.1 is looking really great. It's awesome to see that Blizzard is already looking towards patch 7.1. I'm going to kind of give you guys updates on that as they come along, but I want to give you guys the news for pretty much what's been happening in the past couple of days. As you guys know, I threw out the idea of doing some sort of a news, like a weekly news show or video. I don't really know if I'm going to do that or not. I think it's probably better just covering different subjects in videos, so I'm not like required to like make, oh wow, Ian Hazacostas, made a tweet, or Holinka made a tweet about, being drunk at work. No wonder fucking warlocks suck. I don't really want to do that. But I could maybe do that. It's like a joke, but I don't want to kind of feel like I have to create content every week. But I do want to know, guys, if you do like this type of a format of like a kind of like a news format, like talking about different like little subjects, going on to other things, talking about that, and just kind of laying out pretty much what you kind of need to know. I do want to know what you guys think, because it kind of helps me determine what I want to spend my time on. If a lot of people like it, go ahead and like the video if you like it, and if not, definitely comment and let me know why. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got. Things are looking really bright. There have been some kind of changes I don't really understand, like the follower missions and the legendary thing, but that's just the way it goes. And for everything good that's happening in Legion, I'm still pretty positive, and I think it's looking pretty good. So hopefully we'll get 7.1 sooner than later, Karazhan, and follower missions or not, I'm going to be getting into that raid. So I'm pretty excited, and I'm probably pretty sure a lot of other people are too. So that's pretty much all I got. Thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe.